The Finance Bill, and Deputy Boyd Barrett, you have a final contribution. We're on amendment number 25.
I do. Minister, first of all, I just want to say that I intend to press this issue to a vote. And I want to respond to... Sorry, I just put my phone away. I want to respond to some of the responses you gave to me this afternoon on the issue of bogus self-employment. And frankly, I think, Minister, your answers were disingenuous and borderline misleading the Dáil in terms of the question of the figures, the numbers of people who are categorised as self-employed in the construction industry, and trying to indeed establish the precise facts about how many are on the RCT system. And I also think you effectively misled the Dáil in terms of the related question of the amount of tax revenue that is coming back in under this self-employment tax heading of RTC. So let me correct the record on the assertions that you made, starting with the issue of the numbers and the letters. And I checked the letters you sent me. I've also checked other letters that were sent to you from Patricia King from the Irish Congress of Trade Unions. And I've cross-checked with answers that your department have given to other deputies who've asked similar questions. On the 19th of the 7th, 2016, in a response to Deputy Coppinger, if you want the PQ reference number, it is 168169. Your department, in answer to the following your department answered the following question: to ask the Minister for Finance the numbers registered on the RTC, ERTC and C45 tax system working in construction from the years 2002 to 2015. And in a table you provided to give the answer for the year 2015, you had 74,795 under the heading RTC registrations / active contractors in brackets principals and subcontractors. 74,000. Whereas in your answer to me earlier on, you suggested that you had been accurate in giving me an answer which suggested there was 35,000, and you said that the higher figure of 74, near to 75,000, was people that those subcontractors had employed. Now that is misleading, Minister, because as the question I just read out, which you answered, was very simple and very straightforward. I'll just repeat it again. To ask the Minister for Finance the numbers registered on the RTC, ERTC and C45 tax system. Very straightforward question. The answer you give for 2015 is 74,495. And just to further confuse the pitch, I understand that the person I've been talking to had also contacted Deputy McGrath's office, who's also been asking questions, and was informed that they had got a figure at one point saying in excess of 90,000. I'm not quite sure where that particular figure came from, but I take it on good faith that Deputy McGrath's office had got that from you in some shape or form. So there's a serious mystery here. And in the letter you referred to in July 2017, you referred to the 35,000 in your letter as being subcontractors. 35,000 subcontractors. But then in the answer to Deputy Coppinger, a few weeks later, you say 74,000 principal contractors and subcontractors. Right? So the point is, we have 74,000, not 34,000, working on the RTC system, and they are not principal contractors, or insofar as they can be defined as such, the term principal contractor loses all meaning. Because what we are talking about, is, in reality, is small subcontractors, relatively small subcontractors, who then in turn have 10 or 15 or 20 tradesmen, bricklayers or whatever working for them, who then are all on RTCs. Right? So they're all on the RTC system, all being defined as self-employed for the purposes of revenue, 74,000. And whether they call themselves subcontractors or principal contractors is irrelevant. Totally irrelevant. The point is that they are paying under this, they are being classified as self-employed, 74,000 of them, out of a total construction workforce of 130,000. More than half of the construction workforce supposedly self-employed entrepreneurs. That's nonsense. Absolute nonsense. And it's misleading for you to suggest that somehow I didn't understand the figures or I've misquoted the figures. It is you who are misleading us as to the reality of this. And we keep getting different answers, different definitions in letters. I'd also just refer to Patricia King, because she also suggested that you were misrepresenting this issue. Following my engagement with you in the Dáil on this issue, which prompted you to ask Revenue to write to me, on the 29th of July 2016, Patricia King wrote to you and said, among other things, I quote, that you misrepresented the position of Congress. Misleading, and said it was misleading of you to convey any impression that Congress is in any way satisfied with the performance of Revenue relating to the bogus self-employment system in this sector. That you were misleading, not us. And we can't get to the bottom of this, and we keep getting different figures, different definitions, and so on. Essentially to cover up what I believe, and people working in the industry more importantly, believe is a massive, massive scandal. Then there's the issue of the revenue, right? And you quoted figures today saying that in 2013, there was 132 million came in under the RTC heading for 2013, that in 2014 it was 172 million, and in 2015 it was 174 million. First of all, what you didn't do was acknowledge that that's the gross figure, Minister. The gross figure, not the net figure. And also, even the gross figure doesn't tally with figures your department has given to other deputies in this House on that issue. Because in a PQ, which was given, I think, to Deputy Tommy Bruin and to Deputy Coppinger, if I remember correctly, for 2013, your department responded that the gross figure for 2013 was 157 million. The gross figure. So you say today it was 132 million, but in another PQ you tell people that it's 157 million, but what you fail to actually, so there's a huge discrepancy there, a discrepancy of about 30 million euro, a significant amount, in the information you're giving to this Dáil. That's taxpayers' money. We need to know the truth. Which is it? Is it 132 or is it 157? 30 million is a lot of money. But you also mislead us by not then going on to saying that the net figure is nowhere near that. The net figure, after repayments and deductions and so on, is only 12.3 million. 12.3 million. A very far cry from 132 or 157, whichever it happens to be. Similarly, in 2014, you said 172. I have figures, again garnered from stuff that we've got from you, suggesting that the gross figure was 201. 201 million, not the 172 that you mentioned today, and that the net figure is 31 million. Much less than that. But again, we have different figures coming from you on different days, depending on, well, it literally seems to be depending on the day. We get different figures. And you mentioned 174 million for 2015. What's the net figure? Give us the net figure. That's the one that counts. How much does the Exchequer actually end up with after repayments? Because it is much, much less for every other year than the figures you mentioned today, figures which are themselves unreliable. Another further piece of evidence I think is worth referring to. I don't fully even understand this myself, but it seems to suggest, it seems to be further evidence of the major problem in this area. I asked a question to your department recently about what exactly the Revenue Commissioners mean when they refer to the estimated value of a contract, and to the degree should this be accurate as to the actual amount earned by the person to whom that contract refers. Right? Because today I think it was yourself and Deputy Burke talked about the RCT system being a good system, which gives you the location and the value of contracts. Well, what my contacts in the industry tell me is these contracts of value, I think they're called, contract confirmations, aren't worth the paper they are written on. That the value of the contract given by the contractors never tallies with the actual amount that is paid. That they are virtually fictional figures. That there's a massive, massive discrepancy between the value of the contract and the actual figures that are paid. And this seems to be borne out in the answer I got from you, which says in 2014 there was 319,000 contracts, 319,114 in construction with a value of €28.7 billion, but the payments, there was 804,165, but the payments were only 10.1 billion. Seeming to confirm what my source is telling me, which is, and he has, and indeed is willing to provide them to your department, contracts where the value of the contract is a multiple of what is actually being paid to the supposedly self-employed person whose name is attached to that contract. He gave me one example where in one of these, what are they called again? These contract confirmations, that the value of contract is put down at 25,000, but the person, the worker, named on it only earned €4,800. Massive discrepancy. That's at the micro level, and that bears no relationship to so in other words, the contract confirmation provided by the principal contractor to revenue bears absolutely no relationship to the reality on the ground of what they're paying people, right? And this is part of a very elaborate tax fraud by these contractors to avoid paying people properly. And Revenue and yourself, your department, do not seem to want to chase this down. So, to my mind, Minister, this is an absolutely enormous scandal and tax fraud that we are failing to take seriously. We can't even get the accurate figures. That in and of itself, the fact that there's discrepancies in the figures we get for you, that they vary from month to month, in and of itself justifies a serious investigation into this. We need to get to the bottom of this matter for the sake of public money, tax revenue that is being lost to the public, to the state, and in terms of the abuse and exploitation of tens of thousands of construction workers who are being forced into being misclassified as self-employed when in reality they are actually employees of these dodgy subcontractors or big contractors in many cases. So that's my case, Minister, and I think at the very least, we may have to argue about this, but at the very least this requires getting to the bottom of it and having a serious investigation and having a report on that investigation back to this Dáil within a minimum of 6 months, as is set down in the motion. Okay.